Hey there everybody, welcome back to another Deck Tech. Today we're taking a look at Pack Instinct. We're going to get in here and see how my build of this ticks. Obviously, just from this screen alone, you can see that I've kind of deviated from some of my cardinal rules, but we've got some interesting things going on in this deck that aren't necessarily in the other decks, which kind of made me change up how I built it a little bit. Obviously, I still like to keep things a little bit trim. I've got a what I find to be very favorable curve in this deck. Let's go ahead, however, and just start with the very first card here, which is going to be Fog. I personally love this card. There are a lot of people that don't run it for various reasons, but just to kind of sing its praises a little bit, a lot of people don't see it coming, so they'll swing all out against you. You'll be able to Fog and swing back for lethal. Other scenarios are that people can use certain combat tricks on their turn or something like that that would obliterate all your creatures. You can then use Fog to basically 2-for-1 them, depending on how many spells they've used. And then blocks don't really matter. You get to keep your creatures, and still you will have the upper hand no matter. Really, you're going to have the upper hand after you play this card no matter what. Whether or not your opponent sees it, knows that you'll have it, or anything like that, that means that they'll have to play around it. That means that they'll have to interact with it at some point. I personally love to keep this card in my hand until they are about to kill me, until I'm at lethal, and then use it. It's kind of a last resort card for me, but it can also be a win con in this deck. Moving on, we're going to strike the first of our removal suite. It is not perfect removal by any means, but it is great for green. And now this is going to be the best that we can ask for, especially since we've got such large creatures coming out relatively quickly in this pile. Prey Upon is going to allow us to get rid of them with some modicum of ease, let's put it that way. It is sorcery speed, but it does only cost 1 mana, and we do have tricks later on and creatures later on that are going to make Prey Upon much stronger. Of course, we have to run all the removal we can because we cannot deal with flying creatures. Moving on, we've got Primal Bellow. This is almost a solitary win con for the deck. A 1 mana kill spell, basically, that will end your opponent's struggles. This thing is insane. Obviously, it's going to boost your creature's power tremendously, and most times it'll double it depending on what else you have on it, and it is just sick interaction wise with some of the other cards we have in the deck. Well, Tracker is the next section of our removal suite, not the end of our removal suite, but he is the next section. He's basically fight or prey upon on a stick. He's standing there with the sword. He's like, oh, come on, Bear, let's go do some work. And Bear's like, okay. And that's basically how this card is going to work. He's going to tap down and have one of your creatures take out somebody else. It's just strong removal, like I said. He is in there, though, because he's reusable removal. He is a little weak to removal himself, and can be taken out relatively easily by almost every other deck in the format. But the fact that he's reusable makes him stay in the deck, obviously. Next, we're going to be talking about the 4-pack of these guys that I run. I personally love these guys. You know that I like to keep my deck slim. The fact that this guy has Trample means that we can do all sorts of crazy tricks to him later on to make him a value creature no matter when we draw him, even if it is late game. I run 4 of them though because, as a rule of thumb, if I want a card in my opening grip, I usually say run 4 of them. If you want to see a card every game, go ahead and run 3. That's my standard way of thinking, and I've gone ahead and adapted that and put that into this deck as well, because I do want to see this guy every single game, at least early enough to make him a threat. Even though, like I said, late game Trample can be a very big difference maker and push through those last amounts of damage. Next, we've got a card that I hope you are running. If you are not running this card, you have made a grave error. At first, it might not seem terrific because the haste is not particularly something that you are used to seeing in green, and Shroud means that you can't target it either. But if you've undervalued this card, which is possible, you failed to see the fact that this is going to allow our huge threats, our 4 damages, our 5 damages, our 6, our 8s, whatever we have a lot of big front creatures coming down. This is going to allow them to basically be sorcery speed damage to our opponents, especially if they have Trample. The Shroud is also fantastic in conjunction with a couple of the other cards that we have. It's going to mean that nothing can damage our creatures, but you do have to be very mindful of it, and that is where this card can be kind of absurd obscured in its value is that you can be put into scenarios more often than not where you will equip up one of your creatures. You cannot, cost of 0 to drop the equipment. The equipment's on the creature until you have another creature to put it on or something like that. So if you have one creature out and you've put this on it, you can get into some scenarios where you need to prey upon, or where you could Primal Bellow for the win and it won't take because it has Shroud. And that's where this card can start to depreciate in some people's eyes. The only thing is that you have to take that into account when you're playing it. Always have a backup creature or a backup plan, and also be careful because when you are making the move of Greaves to another creature or from another creature, that will open you up to some 2-for-1 type of spell slinging. Depending on how good your opponent is. So you do have to be a little bit careful of how you use this card, but it is fantastic. It is fantastic, and it should be in your pile simply for the fact that the haste is relevant and the Shroud is super relevant, especially when we talk about cards later on. Now I'm going to talk about Nature's Lore, and this is where I'm a little bit deviant from where I usually stand in most of my piles. Because, of course, up top, you can see Emerald Medallion, so we will take a little journey up here just to talk about why this card's not in there. Emerald Medallion is just a weaker version of Nature's Lore when you think about it. Nature's Lore essentially only costs 1 because that forest is going to come onto the battlefield untapped and ready to go. It is just the same amount of ramp as Emerald Medallion because it is going to allow us to increase our step by 1, and that decreases our spell cost by 1. So it's obviously the same amount of ramp, except that this one is a little bit faster when we use it. Not to mention the fact that there are differing things, but whatever could destroy a land could destroy an artifact, but not everything that can destroy artifacts can destroy our lands. I'm thinking specifically about Pernicious Deed. A Pernicious Deed for 2 will remove the effect of this card, but it won't remove the effect of this card. Not to mention the fact that it's stronger early game than Emerald Medallion, and you can kind of start to see where I made that cut. Now, I do only run 3 of them because I don't think that the full 4 is necessary. We've got 24 forests in this deck, so it's not really a forest drawing problem that we'll run into too often. And as you can see, I keep my pile pretty slim. We do have quite a few 5-drops, but I do keep my pile pretty thin, so we don't really need as quick a ramp as some of the other decks might, or as some of the other builds of this deck might. Now we're going to talk about a card that goes fantastic with Greaves. A lot of people don't run this particular card because it's susceptible to a lot of removal, and it's susceptible to a lot of cards that aren't necessarily removal. Fiend Hunter, while, a solid removal spell, can be dealt with from time to time, but even if you deal with him, if Primordial Hydra is underneath him, he will return to the battlefield as a 0/0 and just die. So any interaction that would remove Primordial Hydra from the game, Flicker Wisp, anything like that, is going to go ahead and just kill it because when it re-enters, it will be a 0/0 and it will die. So this makes this card relatively weak. That is why I only run 1 of them, and of course, it's the shiny one, duh. It's gorgeous, look at that thing. Anyway, my point is that this guy is a fantastic 4-drop. A lot of people will wait to drop him super late in the game, and that's of course a viable strategy. This can be a very powerful bomb, especially once you can pour enough mana into it to make him kill you, or kill your opponent rather, on the very next turn, your very next attack step. However, I like to drop this guy relatively early, depending on what I'm playing, certainly not against red, but as a 4 or 5 drop, just because he is going to sit there, he's going to draw, the attention of your opponent, he's going to allow you to set up some other combos and some other things behind the scene while your opponent struggles to get rid of this card. Not to mention the fact that if they are unable to, you will be able to just demolish them. He's fantastic against Peacekeepers if you have Greaves out, because Peacekeepers, all of Peacekeepers removal is, yeah, I am right. All of Peacekeeper's removal is sorcery speed, so you'll be able to put him down, get Greaves on him safely, and then just commence to win that match. There's not a whole lot people can do against this card once it has Greaves. Now, I certainly don't advocate playing a card with a 1-card combo interaction, but this guy's good at any rate, no matter when you play him. In my personal opinion, I think he goes the distance, and he definitely earns a place in the deck. Blanchwood Armor is another fantastic card, especially when coupled with Garruk's Companion, which we talked about earlier. The 2-drop 3/2 with Trample becomes much more viable late game, mid game, whenever you're able to put Blanchwood Armor on him. I want to have as many Trample guys in the deck as possible whenever I have armor, because it is so strong. It is going to allow us to just force through a ton more damage, and of course we do run the risk of being 2 for 1, but the fact that this is basically sorcery speed burn in a green deck, because we're usually going to be cracking in with our large creatures regardless, and if they have trample, they're not going to be able to stop it if they're tapped out. You just have to be mindful of when you play it, and it will always be a good play. There aren't a whole lot of times where they're going to be able to react. I mean, if they're tapped down or whatever, they are just going to have to deal with this, even if they can kill your creature next turn. Creatures they won't be able to kill, though, will be Dungrove Elder. Now, this guy might not have trample, but he is a freaking powerhouse. A 3-drop 3/3 that cannot be the target of spells or abilities your opponent controls is extremely powerful in this format, not to mention the fact that we have ramp and other things that are going to make this guy obnoxiously large really early. He's a very strong card. I love him personally. Leatherback Baloth is also very strong, 3-drop 4/5. Obviously, the math on that just adds up to being a heavy hitter in this deck. He's going to dramatically change the board state when he comes into play, and he's going to allow you to set up some of those combos and things just like Primordial Hydra. Some of those things where you'll be thinking about, okay, if I fog here and then I get to, Primal Surge, it's just going to allow you to have the upper hand thought-wise in your ability to come up with plans while your opponent tries to deal with this massive 4/5 that you laid to turn 3. So I run all of them. Now, Chameleon Colossus is a card that I kind of struggled with. I didn't always play him, but there are just so many interactions that make him fantastic in this deck. Everything from putting armor on him to the super slick trick of activating his ability, and then while that's on the stack, throwing Primal Surge into the mix is just amazing. Primal Surge, of course, will resolve first, upping his power. Then his ability will resolve, effectively doubling it, which just makes him almost a one-hit kill. He has to be blocked if your opponents are aware of that interaction of cards. And if you have 5 mana open, which is arguably quite a bit, but with the mana ramp, it is not unheard of. Not to mention the fact that protection from black is going to make him a nightmare for things like Rakdos and of course the mono black pile. Not to mention he'll also, after the expansion he became way better because of all the dual color decks, obviously. Now we're going to move on to Fangren Firstborn. A lot of you could be concerned that I'm only running one of these. I decided to run one of them because, like I said, once I start getting in the deeper end of the pool, not that 4 mana is a huge amount, but once I start getting into the deeper end of the pool, I like enter the battlefield effects, things that are guaranteed to go off. This guy is insane if he gets to attack, but even then he's very susceptible to getting killed, so I do like to get 1 or 2 attacks in with him, but it is never guaranteed, and I don't want to be wasting turn 4 or 5 playing multiples of this guy just so that they can kill him with some combat tricks or some burn spells or some kind of removal. However, it is when he attacks, so they can't get too tricky with removing him. So he is still a fantastic card and definitely deserves 1 slot in the 60. Moving on, we've got the final card in our removal suite, if I'm not mistaken, Master of the Wild Hunt. This guy obviously is going to allow us to guy up, which is fantastic, and he's going to be able to deal with any flyers that might be on our opponent's side of the field. He's a great card. Instant speed removal is never a bad thing. Now we've got Primal Hunt Beast. This guy has hexproof. I love anything that says hexproof, so I run 2 of this guy. He's just a solid 4-drop 3/3 that cannot be targeted by anything. Timbermar Lava, I run 2 of. This guy is just a very strong card. He's very susceptible to a lot of removal, obviously, but the fact that he is such a contender on offensive steps means that your opponent is going to have to deal with him. He does have a lot of options when they deal with him, because he is so weak any other time, but he has to be dealt with. It is going to eat up a spell from your opponent, and if you can get in with him, get a couple attacks in with him, that is going to drastically change your opponent's field because they're going to have to throw something down in front of it. Next, we've got Garruk's Pack Leader. I love this card because card draw in green is always fantastic, and almost every single card in the deck is going to activate this ability. Now, I don't run more than one of Grook's Pack Leader because I don't want to get bogged down in those 5-drops, but he is an extremely strong 5-drop, and it's going to allow us to stabilize late game if we have been having a hard go of it up to that point. We're going to be drawing big dudes from the rest of the time on once he hits the table, and they will have to kill him, which isn't super easy since he's a 4/4. Stomp Howler I actually run 2 of now. Now his value went up drastically when the bonus DLC came out and everything like that. Obviously Stomp Howler wasn't fantastic before that point, but after, the DLC and everything started coming out, Stomp Howler grew exponentially in value because there are just so many more targets for him to choose from. So I do run 2 of those. Then, of course, we run Spider because flying is such a problem with this deck to deal with, so 2 Spiders are in here as well. Vorpede's in here because he is a fantastic card. More often than not, I've killed Vorpede to take out another creature at their end step with, Fight Bear, not Prey Upon because that is sorcery speed. But you get my meaning. With the Fight Bear out there, you will be able to have this guy kill something at their end step and then come back and attack on your turn with being a 6/5 because he has Undying. This card, very strong, love playing it. And finally, we have my big bomb, which is Terra Stomper. Now, there are a lot of bombs to choose from in this deck. I chose Terra Stomper because he can't be countered, which isn't always useful, but is useful in enough scenarios to make it relevant. But not only that, he is an 8/8 for 6, which makes him a total value in my book. Not to mention the fact that he has Trample and is pretty much going to just end the game when he comes out. Now moving up, we already kind of talked about why I don't have Ramp in here. Primordial Hydra we already talked about. Vine Lasher Kudzu is a good card, but is a little too weak for this format. The format moves a little bit faster than Kudzu can put up with or keep up with, and enough decks have enough removal to make this weak enough that we don't want to put it in our pile. Late game, it's almost useless. Early game, it takes a while to get going. We are a little bit faster. I mean, you can probably see that from the build that we just went through, but I want this deck to be much faster than Kudzu can keep up with. I want to win early because there are a lot of things late game that this deck can't deal with. Brindle Boar just gains you life. I mean, it's a 3-drop dude. He's not great. He gains you the 4 life. He's just a 2/2. He's not really worth it. He can gain you quite a bit of life, theoretically, because he'll block like a 4/4 and gain you 4 life, which is essentially an, 8 life swing. But he's just not worth it in my eyes. Whenever an opponent plays him, I'm happy because he just doesn't do enough. He doesn't affect the board enough. Cultivate is overkill in my book. We already talked about how I feel about the ramp in this deck. This card, I just don't have enough to do with it. It's just not strong enough. It's a little bit stronger in my build since I like to keep things relatively small, but it still costs too much to be relevant. I mean, if you can get it off for $1 billion, you're probably going to win. But like I said, it's just... I mean, it can swing the battle. You can play with this and do some tweaks and things to this deck. Maybe even put that in place of Terra Stomper and kind of have this be your final little win con or whatever. But it's just susceptible. I mean, if they have any kind of board wipe afterwards or anything like that, I don't know. It's a little too weak for me. It's just not worth making the pile. Costs a little too much for an effect that isn't guaranteed to pay off. Oh, we've got another Firstborn. We talked about that. I don't want to spend that much to draw a card. I mean, I love drawing cards, but not if I have to spend 4 mana for him every turn. Baloth gains you 4 life. He's actually a really strong card. He just doesn't make the cut. He is a great guy. There just aren't a lot of 4-drops that I'm already 4-drop heavy. I mean, 7. That's, my... second tied for second highest, obviously, with first drop from up there. But, with 1 drop. And this guy just doesn't make the cut. I've got other things to do. I'm certainly not going to cut, Wolf Dude, Wolf Master Maker, for this guy. Just because the 4 life isn't always relevant, but making dudes definitely is. My other 4-drops are just a little too good. Timbermaw is going to stay up there. I don't need more than 2 of him. This guy's only good if I have 1,000 billion mana out, so he is not super worth it. Not to mention the fact that I have to pay 8 for +5/+5 when I can pay 1 also instant speed for, probably +4/+4, +5/+5, and upwards of that, with Primal Bellows. So this card, not fantastic. He forecasts a little too much as well, whereas Primal Bellows stays in my hand, stays secret until I want it played. Ant Queen, a lot of people go apeshit crazy nuts for this card. Look at all those ants running around being cute. They are actually kind of adorable. Anyway, this dude makes a bunch of dudes, but still just the 1/1 ants. If we had overrun in this pile, I'd run Ant Queen. We don't, so I don't. That's pretty much just it. The 1/1 ants are not going to be effective enough, really. And I'm going to have to tie up my mana. The 5/5 body's not necessarily going to get in there. It's not dealing with flyers, which is a huge problem. My other 5-drops deal with flyers, things like that. Or just a little bit stronger, I feel. So both Ant Queens are up there. Bountiful Harvest gains me life. I don't care about that. The pack leaders we already talked about. Incremental growth. This is just, I don't run any of this suite of cards. You can see my other videos for some of the reasons that. It's just the way the targeting works in it, I think is very weak. Plus it is 5 mana, and in a deck where my creatures are already so much larger than my opponent's creatures, I don't really need the ++ counters to come down. I'm already kind of dominating the board, so it seems like a waste of a slot as well as 5 mana at that point. Stomp Howler, I don't need all of them in there. Predatory Rampage, creatures you control get +3/+3 until end of turn. Each creature you're opponent, blah, 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 blah. I know I just said if we had Overrun, I would run Ants. But this is not as good as Overrun. Do not let this card trick you into thinking it's as good as Overrun. Your opponent, he or she, still gets to choose how blocks are handled and, you know, who blocks who. It does make your creature super huge, but it doesn't give them trample. It's not a kill spell. It is not a finishing blow. And to make it super effective, you're going to have to tap out all your guys or most of your guys. It's just very dangerous in my eyes. It leaves me too exposed, and it doesn't guarantee a win. I don't want to be that exposed, you know, unless I have the overrun, unless I have the kill, which will guarantee a win. This card does not. A spider, I just don't have enough room for the third spider. I kind of wish I did, because like I said, flying is a problem in this deck. Instant speed, I mean, it just costs way too much. It just costs way too much. I mean, it does give trample, which is great, but it costs like 1,000. We've got Primaclix, which is Primal Crux, which is, it's got Chroma, it's got Trample, it's got great things, but like I said, I mean, it's going to come down possibly as only a 6/6 for 6. My other guy is an 8/8 for 6. That's really the reason behind that. Titan, I don't need any more ramp, though he is a 6/6. He's big. This guy's only good if I have more lands in my hand. If you play this guy dry drop and you don't drop a land afterwards, he is useless because he will get killed before you get the ability to play that land. So you have to do it all at once. Then we've got Avenger of Zendikar. This guy is interesting. Costs too much for me because he doesn't have trample. He's not super powerful on his own. Like I said, I like to keep this deck a little bit faster, so I want the hits that come down late game to end it almost immediately. Balanced Realms we don't need. Howl of the Night Pack is strong. You're going to get a billion 2/2 wolves, but like I said before, the 2/2 wolves, I mean, it can swing. I mean, you can put those cards in here. There are a lot of different ways to build this deck. It just doesn't work with mine because I want to be a little bit faster. The 7-drop for a bunch of 2/2s, not particularly amazing. Biorhythm, I don't even want to talk about that card. I mean, that's garbage. That's complete garbage. Hopefully, you know, I mean, that can ruin you too. Your opponent can just freaking tie it up then. I mean, like, if you drop this and you're ahead, you've made a terrible mistake. Because if they have a board wiper, then you tie. I don't want to tie in this game. I don't even know how the game comprehends ties. I don't want to think about it. I don't even want to comprehend draws right now. It's just too easy for your opponent to ruin you. Oh my god, he's got animals in his eyes though. Check that out, dude. Oh, that is sick. It's like a wolf and a fox. That is madness. Oh, that is awesome. Okay, still bad though. This dude's cool. He costs a little bit less. But like I said, I already got an 8/8 for 6. Guaranteed, so, you know, screw that guy. This guy's verdant. He's coming all over the place. He's forcing his way into these plants. He's not great. He's Evil Deadin'. Oh, does anybody, force, verdant force, Evil Dead. Anybody? Really inappropriate joke. Come on now. At the beginning of each upkeep, he does some shit. I don't care. He costs 1,000. So there you go. That is my way for running that deck. That's how I keep it. That was, whoa, that was like flash. It was like, whoa, wasn't ready for that. Hopefully we have a little bit of fun with it this week. I know I usually do when I play it. It's one of my favorite decks. I'm glad some of you guys voted for it because I really wanted to do it regardless. Maybe that makes me a dick, but I really did want to just jump into this deck regardless of what happened because it is one of my favorites. So hopefully you guys will stay tuned throughout the week so we can get some sick wins with this deck. I do love it quite a bit. So thanks a lot for watching, you guys. I will see you next time.